Ross Purnell, editor and publisher of Fly Fisherman magazine. Welcome to the Loop to Loop podcast, where we make deeper connections with the people behind the magazine. This podcast is presented by G. Loomis of Woodland, Washington. We appreciate them and their support. If you enjoy this podcast, please support our sponsor and also subscribe to our magazine. You can subscribe online at flyfisherman.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at Fly Fisherman Magazine on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And there's a lot of interesting videos on YouTube, including some amazing casting videos that we're going to talk about today. Good segue to introduce our guest today, Ed Jaworowski, who has been a casting instructor, speaker, presenter for 45 years, has written two of the most important books on casting in the past couple of decades. He's good friends with Lefty Kreh. I always consider you two sort of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid of casting. And he's here with us today to talk about a broad variety of subjects. Welcome, Ed.
Hey, thank you very much, Ross. I'm looking forward to this. I'm very excited about it. I'm glad to be part of this entire program that you're putting together, these podcasts.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Where the idea behind these podcasts, I mean, you've written articles for Fly Fisherman for years and years and years, decades probably is more accurate. The idea of the podcast is sort of like learn more about you and get some sort of deeper insights into the topics that you write about. As a teacher and instructor, you're probably aware that sometimes you tell people, you give them instruction in one method and they don't get it. So sometimes a different method, in this case, audio or video, maybe that sinks in with them. So that's the goal.
Yeah, I try to involve or incorporate as many different ways as possible to explain things. And I emphasize from the start when I tell people, I can't teach you to cast. I've never taught anybody to cast. I can teach you about fly casting, the mechanics. Your piano teacher can't teach you to play the piano. He can show you how to do it, but he doesn't sit there and say, here's a etude by Chopin. Here's how you do it. Now you do it. No, come back in 10 years and see if you've got it. But we teach ourselves these kind of things. We get some general idea. We know what we're supposed to do, but it takes time. And the most important single word I can stress comes from the little story of a fellow walking down a street in New York City. He was a tourist, and he had a map, and he was looking to get around the city, and he got lost. And he stopped a man on the street, and he said, "Excuse me," he said, "could you help me? I'm lost." He says, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" The guy says, "Practice, practice, practice, practice." And that's what it is with casting. And it's the one word people don't want, but that's the solution. I mean, that's what you have to understand clearly what you're trying to do, and then you've got to work on it until you get it. And so I can help you get it with words, with drawings, illustrations, with still photos, with videos. I'll try to approach it as many ways as I can until I can communicate with you. And if you don't get it, it's not your fault, it's mine. So tell me, ask me questions. Ask me all the questions you've got, and I'll see if I can, and if I don't know the answer, I'll make it up. No, but seriously, I try to approach it from as many different angles as I possibly can, because everybody's a little different. We all learn differently, and that's the solution to me as far as teaching.
Yeah. Before we take a deep dive into the casting, I want to learn a little bit more about you, like your background beyond casting. There's a lot of topics we need to talk about today, but let's start with your background beyond the casting. What was your other job, other career?
Well, I studied at 3 different colleges and universities. I was a classical studies professor at Villanova University for over 40 years. I chaired 2 different departments. As a classical studies professor, that means I studied the ancient world, the classics, Latin and Greek stuff. I was a Latinist. I taught Latin language, literature, linguistics, ancient Roman history, Roman law, political history, and so forth. And that's what I did for all those years. So that is how I made money to go fishing, essentially. I loved it. I was, as I say, I was chairman for a number of years there. I loved it, except eventually it got to the point where, I realized every year in September when classes started again, there was only one person in the room who was any older than he was last year, because they were 18, 19, 20-year-olds every year. And pretty soon it got a little bit harder for me to identify with this. They were coming from different backgrounds. Their whole frame of reference. You couldn't just drop a name. If you mentioned Johnny Carson or something, they look at you, who's this? Any kind of name. So I knew my time was coming, but I loved every minute of it. I never regretted a thing about my career. And I studied at 3 different colleges. But eventually, I was doing the fishing business. I was writing, I was teaching, I was traveling a lot. I traveled from top of Iceland to the bottom of South America, but I knew the time had come, so I retired from teaching, and with no regrets. I loved every minute of it, and I just changed careers. I didn't stop doing anything. I just swung over into this more. I'd been writing since the 70s, articles and so forth, over 300 articles, but I knew the time had come to change my whole direction and to put the other career aside now, because time had come, and I went into retirement from that, but I didn't retire. I just got very, very much more active in this world.
Retired from teaching the classics,
yes.
But you did not retire from teaching.
No. That's the one thing I feel that I have to offer. That's my skill. I'm not a tremendous athlete and so forth, but I love teaching. That's more than anything else. There are many, many times when I would rather be teaching casting than out there fishing. I just wanted to
maybe you undersell yourself saying you're not a tremendous athlete, because Lefty told me you were an incredible surf caster. Is this true? What's your surf casting background?
This is I was belonged to a surf club in New Jersey for many years, and I was on a casting team. And I would travel up and down the coast going to surf casting tournaments. And this is really, you talk about eccentric. I recorded in a notebook every cast I made with these tournament surf rods, every cast for over 5 years. I mean, not when I was fishing, obviously, but for all my practice sessions that I used to do in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, the tournaments, I'd go to Staten Island, I'd go down to Maryland, Virginia, and I would keep records of every cast I made. I would test viscosity in the reels. I would test all sorts of rigs, test knots, and I would just spend hundreds of hours just standing out there at daybreak.
How far are tournament casters casting? Give me an example. What's your rig like, and how far are you getting out there? Because sometimes I walk along the beach with my fly rod and not catching any fish, and I can only reach 90 feet out.
Sure, exactly.
And surf casters are just nailing it out there. And
Well, first of all, in the casting circuit that we had on the Atlantic coast is different from what they would have in, like, say, England or something. We were restricted on the size of the tackle and lines. We could not use any doubled lines or anything. We had to go directly to the sinker. You couldn't put a shock leader on it. So the rods had a limit in the length. So we had some limitations, but in spinning, I'm throwing 160 yards or so. It's over a football field and a half with a 2-ounce sinker.
160 yards.
Yeah. Upper 400s. The better guys in the convention would throw 500 feet and more. International tournaments, I know some fellas who were casting, now catch this, over 800 feet.
Now, in casting, do some of those principles transfer? I mean, a lot of times I see you making these analogies to...
Tremendous analogies here, yes. I mean, when I do clinics or when I show slideshows, as it were, AV things, I show them pictures of surf casters, and you can see them side by side with fly caster. I've got pictures of myself on a beach that Bob Popovics took with a 2-handed fly rod, and I put it right next to it with a surf caster with a conventional tackle who's throwing a 4-ounce sinker 500 feet. And you'd be surprised how similar it is. The angles, it's all angles and levers. And you know, and there's so many parallels and analogies. And that's, I think what people have to understand, they think that fly fishing is some little esoteric thing. No, it's physics, it's mechanics, and they're very, very similar. The tackle's a little different. And in a strict sense, we don't cast the line in the same sense. We unroll the line, is what Lefty used to keep insisting. But there's so many things physically that we do that are very, very similar. Yeah.
Seems like this is a good chance to get into your series of articles that are in Fly Fisherman magazine this year. You're doing a 5-part series on casting. The first one was acceleration. Part 2 in the series is on
rotation and leverage.
Which you just mentioned. So can you dive into what you mean by rotation and leverage that's in that article?
Yeah. In this newer one, the rotation leverage, what people have to understand is that when you start to make a cast, you start to move that hand. I've heard people say, well, you come forward and you at the end, turn the rod over. You've been turning that rod over from the first millimeter. You can't move that hand without it's turning. Can you see that? It doesn't matter if I'm doing from here, it's turning. I started, the rod's pointing there, it's going to end up that way. It turns. It's part and parcel of the acceleration. You're rotating while you're accelerating. There are 2 forces, force vectors or whatever they call them. One is linear in the acceleration, and the other is angular or rotational, and they're happening simultaneously. And if one dominates the other, you're going to have problems. So it's important to understand that this rotation is speeding up. It's rotating faster and faster, just as it's getting faster and faster in a linear sense. They're simultaneous. And as far as the leverage, I've spoken about this with physicists, kinesiologists, engineers. For many, many years, I keep tapping into these people. Explain to me why this is happening, what makes it happen. Well, as far as the leverage thing, if you're making a short cast, you could just do this with your hand. You're going to make a short cast in a trout stream. A lever, as we all know, has 3 components, right? There's a load. That's what you're moving. If you want to move that rock, you put a pole underneath it, and you make it go across on top of another rock, and you push down at this end, and it lifts the other end. It's called a Class 1 lever. The distance between that fulcrum, that pivot point, and your hand, the longer you make it, the more mechanical advantage. Archimedes said you could move the world if you had a long enough lever going out into space with one finger. So that's how some levers work. Fishing rod, golf clubs, tennis rackets, they're all 3rd-class levers, Class 3 levers. The difference is that the effort where you apply the force is between that and the fulcrum. It's not the other 1st class where the fulcrum is in the middle, and you raise the rock here by pushing down on this end. What happens is the force is in the middle. The hand is here on the grip of the rod. Okay. Where is the fulcrum now? The load is the line that you're moving, the weight of the line or the lure, right? If I did this, where's the fulcrum? The wrist, okay? And that's only about a 4-inch lever. That's all I need for this cast, right? If I move my forearm, the lever is at the elbow. That's the fulcrum. That's where it's rotating. If I move my upper arm, you see it?
Yeah.
I can move further and faster, and I can turn my body. I can go all the way down to my legs. So the leverage is important. Depends what you need. Everything that I teach is built upon one idea, and all these different angles and scientific explanations that the old architectural maxim, form follows function. You want to design a building, first question's got to be what? What's the building for? Is it a warehouse? Is it a hospital? Is it a residence? So casting has been taught for all these years by giving you instructions, rules. There are no rules. not fixed rules that you're going to use all the time. Stand this way, hold it this way, start here, stop there, cast between these two times. It's all nonsense in one sense. It might be perfect for one cast, for certain casts. It may be totally wrong for anything else. Analogies I use all the time. I sit at the computer and I study different sports. Last week I was studying how the difference between throwing a fastball and a sinker or a slider or a curveball, just to understand. Because when people come to me, first question I ask them, what other sports are you familiar with? Now, I don't play these. That's when I say I'm not an athlete, not in that sense. But I want to have a frame of reference. I got to tell you one story that Lefty just loved. A fella came to me for a lesson one time, and he said to me, well, how far do I bring the rod back? Stop. Now, I believe in the Socratic method, which is asking questions. Answer questions with questions to get people to come to the realization. I'm not just going to tell them a fixed answer. So he said, how far do you bring the rod back? I said, do you golf? And he said, yeah, I'm a fair golfer. I don't golf, right? I've taken golf lessons from PGA pros, but I don't golf. I don't have golf clubs. I want to understand the mechanics. And I said, okay, you golf. I said, I don't know anything about golf. I want to hit that little white ball. How far do I bring the golf club back? And he proceeded to tell me. He said, well, you first plant your feet about shoulder width apart. You see the problem already? He said, now you come back like this, you rotate your body, this arm stays straight, you bend this arm. He said, you get back here, you cock your wrist, the club shaft is roughly parallel to the ground and all. And I stopped him. I said, wait, I'm totally confused. I said, I don't understand this. It makes no sense. And he said to me, well, why not? I said, well, because I'm standing on the green putting. And I thought he was going to hit me. He was up. Well, he said, you never, and he raised his voice. He said, well, you never said that. And I got right up into his face and I stared in his eye and I said, that's right. And you never asked. I said, listen to my words. I'm a linguist. All I care about is the words. I said, I want to hit the ball. This is the information I'm giving you. How far do I bring the club back? And he went like this and he kept thinking. He says, well, it all depends. I said, stop right there because now we're making progress. I said, now ask me how far I bring the rod back. I might bring here, 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 till I run out of arm. It all changes, it changes, it changes. You can't have fixed rules. On a golf course, you never do the exact same thing twice in a row, ever. You hit off the tee, and now you're in the rough or you're in a trap or something. You want to hit, 20 feet. You want to putt 16 inches. You want to hit it 300 yards. You want to fade or draw the ball to the right or left. Every stroke does something different. And what you do is, and it's the exact same thing in casting, you look at that ball, and what's the first question? Everything is going to determine. Where's it supposed to end up next? And then you create a golf stroke, taking everything into account, all the conditions and circumstances. You might have a tree behind you, something. So
it's what you want to accomplish. You need to determine what you want to accomplish and then obey the rules of physics, obviously, to get it done as efficiently as possible.
I tell people that right up front. This is what we're going to do. I can't tell you how to cast until you tell me what you're trying to do. How far is it supposed to go? Do you want that line to unroll straight ahead? Do you want it to go 30 or 40 feet and in the air just turn 90 degrees to the right or the left? People say, I can't do that. I said, come over here at the casting time. Let's show you. Yes, you can, but you've got to start out with the result, with the end, what you're trying to accomplish, and then we take a few principles of physics. They're incontrovertible, whether you like them or not. They happen. So then we set up a stroke for this particular. If you're teaching beginners, people say, well, you have to give them something to do. I said, yes, I tell them what to do, but you must always emphasize to them that we're standing out here on the grass or on this pond. We're going to cast 20 or 30 feet or something. There's nothing overhead. There's nothing on the side. There's nothing behind us. So, okay, we're going to make a straight ahead cast here. Here's how you can do that. Persons maybe never touched a fly rod. So I'm going to tell them, okay, just want to get them used to it. I will give them some fixed instructions. I'll say, come bring it and stop it here. But this is only for this cast. When you get into this sport, you're going to find out that you're going to have to make 50 or 100 different casts in a day. So what I'm telling you to do now is for this cast, just to get you used to the tackle. Instructors never say that. They just tell them, leave the student with the impression that this is the way to cast. No, this is how to make this cast.
Yeah, goal one is just to get the line moving, so
yes,
they
get it moving, and then you speed up and stop.
A little bit.
Sure, and then now this may be totally wrong in a different situation. Everything I'm telling you could be wrong. You'd do something different if the conditions are different. If we're fishing, and you're making little short casts on a trout stream, and you're casting 20 or 30 feet or something, and you just go back and forward. Now I step 5 feet to the right. Now there's a bush behind me. I can't now do what I was just doing standing over there. I have to change something. What am I going to change? How am I going to change it? Why am I going to change it? And so, this is the approach, that you learn a few basic principles and then you just apply them in endless ways. If you made a cast went 30 feet, let's say, and now I make a second cast and it goes 40 feet, I had to have done something different. No matter how tiny or how slight, I can't have done the same thing. And do I want it to go straight or do I want it to curve? Do I want it to go down or want it to go up? I mean, people give you these rules. They say a backcast, it's popular now amongst a few people I've heard, a backcast is an upstroke. Not necessarily. The forward cast is a downstroke. Are you kidding me?
It depends where you are and what's going on.
It's everything. You might have to throw it up at that angle. You might throw it down at this angle. You might have to curve it. Yeah. You can't start out with these basic rules and just keep pounding them.
Getting back to the leverage article that's in the April-May 2025 issue of Fly Fisherman, you were just talking about fulcrums and stuff. Just to abbreviate everything, the fulcrum on a seesaw or teeter-totter is in the middle.
It's in the middle, exactly.
And the point of your article is about using the fulcrum, for short casts, it's in your wrists. And as the casts get longer and longer, you change the fulcrum to your elbow, to your shoulder,
to your hips,
and then down into your hips. Yeah. So you're moving the fulcrum point to make casting easier, more efficient. I mean, your goal here is not to make longer casts, right? What's the result of moving the fulcrum?
Result of moving the fulcrum is the principle in physics says that the farther the distance from the effort, where you're applying the force, to the fulcrum, the longer that is, what it does, it enables you to move that hand faster and farther over a longer distance. And so it depends on the cast you need. Here's the best example I could give you. If we stood 20 feet apart and had a catch with a baseball, we could take it. It's almost like throwing a dart. We throw the ball, you throw it back to me. But now, this is how you throw a baseball, I would say. All right, go out to center field and throw to home plate. Why did you put this way back here, use your whole body, and turn it and go this direction?
Different fulcrum.
You elongate. These don't have to be in a perfectly straight line. But physicist said to me, he says, doesn't matter. He said to me pointedly, I made a cast. I was explaining to him what I was doing. This is 35, 40 years ago. He said, oh, I can see why you have no problem. He says, all the leverage came out of your hips. I said, what are you talking about? And he started explaining to me about class 3 levers and so forth. He said, you use no more, these are his words. He said, you use no more effort to cast 80 feet than you do 30 feet because of the leverage, because of the angles, because you're using this longer lever arm. And that's what it's all about. It depends on the result you want. What cast? I had an instructor say to me recently on this, he said, oh, you should never turn your body when you cast. Now, I said, and he's an instructor, tell Tiger Woods that he should never turn his body when he swings a golf club. And tell a pitcher he shouldn't turn. Tell a batter not to. If he's bunting, he's not turning his body. But if he's taking a full swing, every sport in creation does that. Comes to fly fishing, you're telling you not to turn your body. There's a time when you should. You have to. So that's why the longer lever makes it all possible. Whether it's just distance or you have to throw a heavier fly, distance is 100% relative. I mean, a 50-foot cast is one thing. What are you casting 50 foot? Which direction's the wind coming and so forth? It may be very easy or very hard to cast 50 feet under different conditions and casting different objects. So the leverage, you've got to learn to adjust it to what you need. It's like taking a long swing in golf, putting, chipping, driving, same kind of thinking. That's all.
Yeah. So the your next article, the critical angle, that's in the June-July issue, which and I've been editing that story recently, and I think we've talked about fulcrums and angles and stuff, but your critical angle seems very important for it's part and parcel of the fulcrum is paying attention to these angles. Can you explain the concept behind the critical angle?
Absolutely. This is my pet. I've had several people tell me, this is your contribution to the history of fly casting. I've gone back several hundred years, and I've never seen even an allusion to it or reference to it. It started 35 years ago or so when a physicist mentioned to me, we were talking about something, kicking ideas around. I'm in a physics lab with him, and this is his world. And he shook us. He says, you understand all the physics. He says, you just don't know your math. And I said, like a little kid, I said, Frank, that's why I'm talking to you. I don't know the math. But he said, if this rod and this line were 90 degrees when you start to load that rod, when you move that handle, okay, mechanically speaking, just from a mechanical standpoint, that's the least efficient position you can be in. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. For a short cast, that's fine. What happens is, if you have a 90, it can be anywhere from 90 degrees to 180 degrees. But he said 90 degrees is most inefficient. And we went on to something else. Well, I took that and I started kicking the idea around. I thought, if 90 is the most inefficient mechanical, what would be the most efficient angle? And I ran tests for several years, tested all sorts of things. The most efficient is 180 degrees. The difference is, and we ran tests, we did films of it in a film studio in Dallas. The smaller that angle is, say at 90 degrees, the bend in the rod, you're only loading up in the tip.
It's what a lot of people would call tip casting.
Exactly. And if that's all you need, then that's what you should be doing. But the longer the cast, just like the longer the lever, the longer the lever you need, and the wider the angle should be. So you just keep elongating it. You can take, and I do this at shows, I'll lay the rod across my hand like this, laying straight, pointing straight back, and I take this finger and I accelerate with this finger. I start slowly and go like this, and I stop it. I've got to stop it. Boom. And we measured it at one show. It was between 80 and 85 feet of line, and I didn't cast with my casting hand. I cast with this finger, just started, boom, because of that critical angle. What happened, I've had engineers look at it, and they pointed out, look how the bend comes right into the cork, into the handle. I've got videos of this. I've got stills. It's incredible. So the critical...
But to do that, you have to start with a critical angle of about 180 degrees,
for the
which
longest.
Means the rod and the line are straight on your backcast.
Yes,
Is that
exactly.
Right? I mean,
they're in a straight
that's
line.
how you get maximum power or maximum efficiency.
Yes, it brings the load all the way down. You can look at the curve of the rod. It might be curved like this, just the tip of the rod. Once you open it, it goes like, and the bend keeps creeping down right into the handle. We did this at a film studio in Dallas. We were filming the DVD that Lefty and I made. This was 12, 14 years ago. We had two cameras, one on a boom overhead, shooting down here, and I was in a spotlight there. It was a darkened film studio, and the other camera was at ground level. We took the rod, and I held it straight out this way, and we took the line 90 degrees and tied it to a scale. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until I was straining, agonizing. Oh, I could not get 1 pound of resistance in that rod, 1 pound of pressure. Then I went forward and put it at 180 degrees. I just went like this, pulled it, took it up to over 7 pounds of pressure.
Yeah. So those are exactly the same as fish fighting principles. Like the first time I ever went to the Florida Keys, John Randolph took me to Stu App's house.
Right.
We got a scale out in the parking lot, and he showed me exactly, this is how you pull on a big fish.
It's exactly the same. We've been fish fighting like that for generations and generations. No one has ever taken that idea and applied it to casting. And I went back a couple hundred years. I could not find a reference. If it's there, I haven't found it. but I've never seen anybody take that same concept and you talk about the fish fighting. Jake Jordan, for example, has revolutionized big game fishing by using the same principle. He's taken marlin on 20-pound tippets, a couple 100 pounds, by using the same principle. The rod is pointing virtually straight at the fish, and he's doing it all with a reel, and he's holding the rod with 2 fingers and a thumb. I fished with him and catch sailfish. It's simple, using the same principle. No one's ever applied it to casting. And so I came up with this thing, and I didn't know what to call it. I said, this angle, because there's all kind of angles, I call it the critical angle. And just because it is so important. And you've got to understand that there's a time when you cast this angle, that angle, and so forth. It all depends. It could be anywhere. So what is wrong with someone saying, oh, will you come back? Stop your backcast at 1 o'clock or something. Well, give me 110 degrees or something? Why? Why shouldn't I go to 150 degrees for this cast? And so it's going to make everything. And that's why you can make longer casts, throw bigger flies, and so forth with less effort. It's because of the acceleration. It's because of the leverage, understanding the rotation, and the critical angle. They all work together in loading this rod.
If you only do one kind of fishing, if you just cast a size 16 or 18 sulfur, 40 feet on a Pennsylvania trout stream, you can just tip cast the whole time.
Sure.
And you can also fight the fish from the tip too, and you'll get along very fine.
Sure.
But if you want to cast a 10-inch predator fly for golden dorado, or make a long cast out on the tarpon flats and stuff, and you want, and especially in situations, I think all of your stuff, all of your advice is super important for when you have to cast all day. I mean, like if you're tarpon fishing, sometimes you only see 5 fish, so you're making 5 casts. But if you're peacock bass fishing and you have to throw a massive fly all day long, just relentlessly, you need to be as efficient as possible, or you're just going to kill yourself out there.
We're talking about efficiency. It's all has to do with efficiency. And it's not only just distance either we're talking about. You could be casting a little 16 Adams or something, and you're casting at 30 or 40 feet. If a stiff wind is coming at you, you need more bend in that rod because the wind is going to eat up energy. I test these things in Tierra del Fuego, just on that idea. I was standing out in the river, and the winds were howling, and the guide came out to me, and he said, I've never seen anybody cast against that wind like that. I said, well, I'm just trying to learn things. I'm studying things here. And what happened was I was making, I would call, theoretically, 100-foot casts. I was netting 25 to 30 feet. The wind robbed 70 feet out of, I had that rod bent like a horseshoe, and when it straightened out, because of the wind, it only went about 25 feet. If somebody threw a switch and turned off that wind in the middle of the cast, that line would have gone an easy 100 feet.
You're putting the energy of a 100-foot cast
into it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
Theoretically,
you're expending that much energy.
So again, it's not just, so I had to get this horseshoe bend, this deep bend into the handle to get that end of that line to go 25 feet. So it's not just this, it's conditions. Yeah. So you depend, when you're going to make a cast, you say, what do I have to accomplish? What are the conditions I'm facing? Is there something behind me? Is there something on the side? Are there branches overhead? Maybe I have to put it in this hand. Maybe I have to come over this shoulder, and so forth. Maybe the stiff wind coming from this direction, I can't do it because the wind is so severe. So I turn and I shoot my back cast 100 feet, because I have to use the back cast as the delivery. And there's no difference between forward cast and back cast physically.
What's been the feedback on things like critical angle and stuff like that? Have you heard from people that it's helped them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the first things that people say to me constantly, I'll show them. I say, look, let's take this rod, get it off the vertical plane. None of this straight casting. For some casts, it's perfect. Maybe you have no other option, so you have to do that. I'm not saying there's any right or wrong. If you don't have to go overhead, it's more efficient to do this and turn your body this way. You can get a longer stroke. You can control direction. And I get them into the critical angle. And the first reaction I get from almost everyone is, oh, this is so much easier. I said, yeah, I know. And that's the reactions you get. And I've never had negative comments on it. It's just that, I got to practice. I said, yeah, you got to practice it until that becomes second nature to you. Just as what you're doing right now is second nature for this situation. And what you're doing for this situation is fine. But it doesn't allow you to do other situations when that severe wind comes, when you want to throw that big fly to a predator. When you're fishing, I was fishing in jungles, flooded jungles in Venezuela. I mean, trees everywhere. You had to thread your backcast through an opening in the trees. At the same time, you had to thread it in through, under, around a bunch of dead trees here in the jungle on a forward cast. So both casts, you can't follow any, you stop at a certain point. No, because there's nothing but jungle behind you, dead trees and so forth. You've got to throw it underneath those branches, come around here and go this way. Fishing up on the Poconos one time at a club, I took Lefty up there. I left Lefty at a certain stretch. I walked upstream, waded across these fast water to fish on the other side. 2 minutes later, I hear Lefty, hey, Ed, do you have a net? And I'm thinking, oh, man, I just got out here. So I stumbled back. I thought, boy, I hope this is worth it. I climb up the back. I walk down there, and I look in the water, and he's got this trout, bigger than anything I've ever taken in that stream. And I said, yeah, this is worth it. What he had to do to make the cast was make a sidearm back cast underneath these pine branches that were all hanging behind him. He put it way down here. Then he brought the rod around and made an overhead forward cast. See, people say your back and forward cast should be in the same plane. He can't, because if he does this, he's in the trees. He'd made a back cast under the branches. As it was unloaded, he brought the rod and he made a forward cast. One cast. He threw it to the other side of the stream. There was a trout feeding. He put a big yellow and black beetle on there. It drifted about 2 feet. This big trout came up and took it. It was 23-inch trout. I mean,
wow.
But it was one cast. He just looked at the situation. Here's what I have to do here. I can't make a norm, whatever that means. I can't make an overhead cast here. I got to go sidearm. And then he brought it around, and he just made an overhead forward cast. But he had to get it underneath those branches there and shoot it out that way to make the long cast across the stream. That's what I mean. You have to figure all that out. That's what makes this so fascinating, is that you have to be able to adapt to things. And this is what I try to teach people. On this situation, I'll give them situations. How would you do this? Well, I said, well, wait a minute. That's going to be in the way. Oh, okay. I want them to think. That's all I try to do, is get the students to think and learn a few basic things. We're going to apply it a little different in this situation from that situation.
When did you meet Lefty? Like, what's the origin story of your friendship?
Early 70s, 71, 72, I was instrumental in organizing a fly fishing club in Philadelphia. After a couple of years, we started having guest speakers come in. Somebody arranged for Lefty to come up. I took him to dinner when he got here, and we got chatting about this, that, and the other. And as he was doing a demonstration, and there's 100 people standing around, and he's talking, chatting, all his one-liners. He's telling jokes. He's like Jack Benny or something. He's telling jokes, and he uncorks one in the middle. Hey, did you hear about the guy who says to his wife, and I don't remember the joke. All I remember, he came forward, and this line just went and just kept going, and he did. Everybody was in awe, and it was an impressive cast. I never saw anything, but that's not what caught my attention. I had just met him, that's the first day that we ever met. I kept my eye on him, and I looked at him, and I saw, I didn't see him do anything that I could appreciate, that would account for the result. And it was all matter of fact. He understood the basics. He understood some things. And from that day on, we sort of struck it up. We went to, I started going from Philadelphia to Baltimore, back and forth, for 42 years.
To Cockeysville.
To Cockeysville, outside of Baltimore.
Yep.
And we discussed casting endlessly. We went out, we tried things. My job was, he said, look, you're fortunate. You have the access at the university to talk to all these scientists. And what I would come back and say, Lefty, what do you see what the guy explained to me? Why this works. And Lefty appreciated everything. He did things so instinctively, intuitively. The first time I ever saw anything done by Lefty, as far as a book, was in a magazine. It was 1962, 63, something like that. He had a picture of him, and this guy. Now, I grew up in a world where, this kind of motion, or the rules, and we lived by those rules. I had one book, I was just looking at it, an old book. These are the kind of things we learned from. And it said, it's a fast motion, it's like a snap or a jerk, and stop it when it's perfectly vertical, and don't throw the line behind you. I just reread this. It's in this book. And he said, as if you were aiming at a star up there, stop, throw up there, and then chop down to the vertical, and do it with all the authority and strength that the tackle can stand. And these are the books I grew up with. And I thought, so fly fishing history, there's before Lefty and after Lefty. It's like AC and AD and BC and dating. There's the world changed with Lefty. But he did it instinctively, intuitively. He said right off the bat, look, I just said, if I'm throwing a ball, I can do this. But if I go out to center field, I have to do something different. I have to bring my hand way back here and so forth because I got to get more speed in my hand. It was the leverage. I was the one who went to the physicists and the engineers and came back to Lefty and explained why this is all working. And we worked as a team. We never had one moment of disagreement. We discussed topics. 50% of the time, he was right. The other 50%, I would, because we would throw things. I said, yeah, but if that's so, what if you do this and so forth? And I said, you're right. Doggone, I didn't see it from that angle. We went back and forth like that for all those years.
I love that description of it because in the film that we're making right now, that's going to be out in a couple of months, Lefty, the greatest of all time, short plug. In the film, he says that, he saw someone cast. Joe Brooks gave him a fly rod, but he was in very poor situation, humble, and there was no one around to teach from. So he didn't have someone to teach him. He said he didn't have any books, any instruction, and he figured it out himself, based mostly on how he threw a baseball.
Yes, exactly.
Basically.
Yes.
So as you say, he figured it out instinctively, where you had a lot of different resources than him. You can talk to the engineers and physicists and go to the library and look at all the books, but Lefty just learned all this stuff on his own. Basically, everything he figured out on his own.
Was so instant, and and I was the exact opposite. As a little kid, I never trusted my instincts. I had to have somebody in authority or something confirm why this guy. Lefty just said, "This works better." I took my arm back here. Look, I can throw it across the Potomac. And see, I couldn't do that.
So you probably have 100 hilarious stories about Lefty. Do you have a funny story or a fishing story you could share with us about Lefty?
Well, one thing about Lefty, he had no ego about himself. What I found really funny was his wife, Ev. He came home one day, and she said, I went to the market, and I bought these few things. And she said, well, where's the eggs or some item like that? He said, you didn't ask me for eggs. She said, Lefty, I don't know how any man can memorize or remember 1 million jokes, but can't keep 3 items on a shopping list straight. And he paused for a minute. He said, that reminds me of the one about the guy. She says, get out of my kitchen. She threw him out. And then another time he came home, she said, you had a call today from President Carter's office. Why would he want to talk to you? Just like with that inflection. I don't know. I guess we're good. But
he still got the regular husband treatment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She didn't take him seriously, So, but there were so many things that we, as you say, it could be 1,000 stories. But he showed me so many things. He taught me how to think differently, and that's what I preach. Not a different way of casting, not a different style or different. People say. I've heard actually somebody ask, well, how come Ed and Lefty say do this? Well, they have a different style. No, it's not style, just physics, and it's not a different style. It's a different way of thinking about casting. And he said to me one time, one of the very first things he ever taught me was one of the most valuable lessons. And this is, I'm going back 50 years now. And he said, Ed, any cast you see somebody make that you don't like, let's call it a bad cast. Maybe it had a big looping back cast. Maybe it had shock waves. Maybe it was a tailing loop, whatever it was. Anything you didn't like about the cast, he said, and it was the best advice he ever gave me. He said, practice so you can do that exactly on key. Duplicate every bad cast. Practice it and practice so you can do that. He said, that's the only way to be sure you know what you're talking about. He says, not showing off. He says, he said, I've mentioned that to a number of people. No one's ever taken me up on that. It was a fellow in Illinois, another guy. I've mentioned that number, try this. So I took it seriously. I really did. And I would religiously, I see a cast, and I think this is what, and I would practice and practice and practice so I could duplicate it. One time I had 10 people lined up, and I said, I want everybody to make one cast. And I didn't care if it was right or left-handed, because I used to do both. And I would get down, I said, now watch, look at his back cast, now watch. And I walk up there, and I would duplicate. It looked the exact same. I mean, if it had an angle in it, if it was a big swooping curve, whatever, I could just duplicate everything. And I just took one after another, I went down the line, took the rod from him, and duplicated. Because this just proves that you understand exactly A causes B. That's all. He said, and I made that like almost a religion with myself.
That's one of the things I admire about you. Like when we go out casting on the grass, you can make the bad cast just like instantly. And I'm not a good enough caster to where I can do bad casts on command.
Yeah.
You know, I make bad casts
Oh,
accidentally all the time.
So do I.
But just to like throw a tailing loop or, you know, stuff like that just on command is shows that you have like a complete grasp on what's going on.
See, whether it's a good or bad cast, Ross, depends on whether you wanted that to happen. What I commonly do at shows, I will stand at the casting pond, and I'll say to people, I'm going to make a straight cast here. And I make a cast that runs down the pond and, you know, goes 40 feet or something like that. And I said, and it was a nice, tight, smooth loop. And I said, was that a good cast or bad cast? And everybody, oh, it was a good cast, a nice cast. I said, okay, this one is going to look the same. I said, but I'm going to throw a tailing loop. I'm going to have that line cross over precisely 3 feet before the knot where the leader's connected. And I come back, and that line's going all of a sudden, boom, and it tangles at 3 feet. I can do it at 6 feet. I can put wind knot in the leader on purpose. And I said, now, was that a good cast or bad cast? And people, oh, that was a terrible cast. I said, I beg to differ. That was a perfect cast. Now, I don't want that to happen when I'm fishing.
Yeah, if you're doing it on purpose, it becomes amazing.
I can make this line do that. When we were doing the DVD, the video years ago, we were up on Fishing Creek, up at Barry's place, and I said, for the camera, I said, I'm going to put wind knots in this leader on purpose to show that we understood what causes tailing loops. And it's not what people keep saying that it is. And I made 10 casts in succession and put 10 wind knots down the leader. It looked like a rosary when I was done. And I had knots, and I just smiled. I said, it's on the video. And I kept making these knots because we understand what causes things. And yes, I don't want that to happen when I'm fishing, but I can make it happen or not. And I make bad casts, certainly I do. I get careless, I get excited or something, but I never make the same bad cast twice in a row because I say, dummy, you know, look what you did. But you just learn the physics, the mechanics, how this causes us, what makes this happen, what makes that happen. That's how you learn to do curve cast. Curve cast was my specialty. I would put sticks in the ground, and Lefty said, he showed me different ways, and then I would embellish on that and find different ways. If you're a right-handed caster, because of the structure of the bones in the forearm, the ulna or the radius, it's hard your hand can turn to the left easily enough like this. And it has to do with the alignment of the bones I won't go into. This is a little tougher this way. Well, I've got 5 different ways to make it. I could put it in this hand, and makes it to make it cast that way. But there's all little different things you can do. But it became sort of a specialty with me. And what I used to do is put sticks in the ground and cast around them, like 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. Then I would curve them this way, to the right, to the left. And then put a target there, a ring, have it go around it and drop in the ring. And I couldn't hit it all the time, believe me, not by any stretch, but it was something to shoot for. You always had to have a target, a goal to be going for. And so you subject your understanding of these physics, these mechanics, to this particular cast.
And there's a lot of people out there that think things like curve cast is just trick casting and has no application in actual fly fishing. But even just in trout fishing, like a curve cast can help you put slack in the leader in the most intense situations. Or if you're fishing for a 10-pound brown trout in New Zealand, you throw a curve cast, the fly is in front of the fish, but your leader and line is not over the fish. I mean, you can, these things are, you use them in real life applications all the time. It's not just like if you're in the jungle and have to shoot around mangroves and stuff like that. Being able to control your fly line and, more importantly, what happens in your leader, that control is everything.
Absolutely. I've caught trout, I've caught bass, I've caught striped bass, I've caught bonefish, I've caught peacock bass by using curves. And this is really crazy because I'm obsessed about certain things. In 2012, 13 years ago, I made thousands of casts in the course of a year, traveling around, fishing for different species, fresh and salt water. But I can recall the best single cast I made in 2012. It was on a stream up in the Poconos for a trout because I figured something out. He was on the back side of this fast water, in the back seam. And I made 12 perfect casts, my definition, perfect cast. The fish didn't appreciate my presentation, but he never stopped rising. And I made 12 casts by actual count, and I finally studied those currents, and I made a cast. It went up, turned a big swooping 90-degree turn here, and I got the fly on the back side of the fast water. It floated down to that fish, and he exploded on that cast. Now, that was in June of 2012. I can show you the exact pool on the stream on Mud Run. In 2015, I've been in the same situation, same pool, same time of year, fish rising on the backside of the same current. They were always between there and the bank. And I looked at that fish and I said, I've been here before. One cast it took.
I've got one for you.
I made the same cast and it took this much motion with my hand. That was it. At the very, very end, I made boom, and the line went out, swooped around this way. As you say, the fly was moving much slower than the line. So by the time the line straightened out, he blew up on a 17-inch brown. And they're the things that this is what it's all about to me. It's not just catching a lot of fish or catching a big fish. I want the one that called for something from me. I had to learn a skill to make that one particular cast. I may never have to do it again, but I figured out a situation. That, to me, is the satisfaction. That's what I'm looking for. I'm an experiences there that you take that one, and just live. Remember that day. I remember that. I remember the cast. I remember the exact spot. And, if I caught 10 fish or 20 or 50 fish or one fish, it's not that important. It's the one that I caught because I was able to do something that I couldn't have years before.
Yeah, and it's not always the biggest fish. It's the most challenging fish and that took the most effort. Like those are the ones that you remember. Those are the ones that stick in your mind.
See, I have a philosophy. I do not believe there's any such thing as luck in fishing. It's not in my dictionary. Everything is cause and effect in nature. You may hit it. You may not be able to explain it or understanding, but something. So my search is finding what made that happen. Luck. If there were luck in this sport, I wouldn't even own a fishing rod. I couldn't care less if I would wait around for luck to happen. Well,
we're fly fishermen. At our very essence, we believe we can change our luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, luck is when you get it right. Yeah. And sometimes I don't. I hit myself in the head. I've been trying for that fish for an hour, and I can't get him. But I know there's an answer, but that's my quest. That's what I'm looking for, figuring out situations, challenges, individual challenges, this fish or that fish, and so forth. And I've had fish do some crazy things, but it's not luck. Something triggered that fish to do this. And people will say to me, I'll be introducing somebody to sport, and they say, why'd that fish take that fly? I said, if I knew why that fish took that fly, I could run for God. I said, I don't know, but I know from experience that if I do this or do that, I can possibly get a reaction from him. Or why didn't he take that fly? I don't know. I thought it was perfect. The fish said no.
Practice, analysis.
Exactly, analysis. You analyze everything. You look at all the circumstances. In Iceland, I was casting for some salmon, and we had to quit by 10 o'clock at night back then on this one stream in northern Iceland. And this was 45 years ago. and I couldn't get these salmon. I saw them rolling out there occasionally. I climbed a hill. I'm sitting 40 feet above the stream, and I just kept looking at it like I was looking at a map or something. And I watched where the salmon would occasionally roll, and I sort of drew a sketch, and I thought, I was fishing there. I got to be standing over here to get that fly to swing just right. So I scrambled down the hill, went out into the stream, and it was getting too deep. So I went back, took my vest off, pulled the waders up as high, and I was still, and this is 9:45 to 10 o'clock, I took 3 salmon.
Clock is ticking.
The clock was ticking, but I saw it. I could have been standing in that same place and fished till 10 and never had a touch. And I realized I could only get the right angle. And I saw there's where, and I'm looking down like an aerial view at this pool, and I said, there's where I have to make that cast from. And I didn't see that when I was in the water. And so, again, solving those kind of situations, I say, darn it, they weren't big fish. They were small. They were 5-6 pound. They don't talk about grills. They're all salmon to them up there. But
you solved the problem. That's the important
It's solving
problem.
problems. That's what I live for. I love that challenge. I love that challenge.
Speaking of solving problems, that's a big part of your 2 casting books. I might have the year wrong, but 1992 you made Perfecting the Cast?
No, that was The Cast.
The Cast.
The Cast, yeah.
1992, The Cast.
Right.
And then about 20 years later, you second book, Perfecting the Cast.
Almost 30 years, yeah. It was 2021, I think it was released, Perfecting the Cast. And what it is, there's nothing changed or different. There's just a lot more. I learned so much in those 30 years. So I took the ideas that I first brought out in the cast, and in fact, even that book, Lefty said to me, publisher came to me, from Stackpole, Judith, and she approached me about doing a book. And I said, I'm not doing any books on casting. She said, well, a couple magazine people say, you're the up-and-coming guy on casting. I said, no, it's too controversial. I said, I felt like a turkey shoot. You stick your head up and people take shots at you. But I called Lefty and I said, no, I'm not interested in a casting book. But I thought about it. I called Lefty. I said, Lefty, are you going to redo your book, the one he did in 1974? He said, no. He said, I want you to do it. I mean, I almost fell over. He says, show them what we've learned in the last 20 years. Okay, so I called her back, went out to Stackpole, and one thing led to another, and I came up with this first book. And what I've done since then, I just continued to research, to study, to run tests, to read, and run all sorts of tests and experiments. And so Perfecting the Cast, my latest book, is the summation of my 45 years. It's where I am so far. And since I've written that, I've come up with some new ideas, which are going to be in these articles that I've done for you on the leverage and so forth. I went back to university. I talked to another physicist about angles and levers and things. And I'm learning all the time. I don't have all the answers. I'm still figuring stuff out, but I can still keep learning. And that's what I want to do. I want to learn. So I've got a fuller understanding of a lot of the things I did back then. Same principles, but now I appreciate, that's just another. I went to England and got introduced to two-handed rods in the early 90s with Hugh Falkus, legendary. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he put in a book here, he all sorts of praises. He was doing a book, and he called the publisher, and he says, don't do it. I'm going to write something else put a comment about me in there. But I came back, and I went to the physicist, and I showed him this two-handed rod. I said, now I got this two-handed. The guy says, calm down. He says, the physics doesn't change. It's a different application. So that made me feel better, and I started doing two-handed. And I did a lot of overhand two-handed for years and years in the surf, because the first requirement when you're fishing the surf, above everything, is distance. Yes, sometimes the fish are in a wash, obviously, but more than distance is the one thing you're going to need when you're standing on the beach. So it's just I found new applications for it. That's all. I took the principles. I said, this is just another way of getting the same result. But you have to do it different, because I couldn't haul because I got two hands tied up now on the rod and so forth. But the principles didn't change. And so it's just a further, all the last book, Perfecting, is a refinement from that first book. More details, more explicit things. And it's, as I mentioned before, this idea of form follows function, form follows function. What I believe there, page 1, the title of chapter 1 is Form Comes Last. People have always been wrapped up in telling you how to stand, how to move, where to hold it, angles and so forth. The last thing you decide is that. It's like the golf stroke again. It's that type of thing. You first look at all the situation, you look at all the circumstances, the distance, the direction, the angle. Do you want to hit a high shot that's going to have backspin on it? Do you want to fade it to the right, draw it to the left, blah, blah, blah? Are you chipping 15 feet from the green? Are you hitting 300 yards? Are you putting 10 inches? The strokes change. You start out with the result, and all the conditions that you have around you, you take it all into consideration, then you create a stroke.
Yeah.
And that's my whole philosophy.
In your 5-part casting series that you're doing in the magazine, you're doing 5 articles on 5 different principles, so to speak. What would you think is the most important or foundational principle that you're talking about in the series?
Well, there's a lot of things. Sort of holes are important. They help load the rod. The wider critical angle helps tremendously. Of everything, the first and most important thing by far is acceleration. I summarize it in one word. And we know that it's rotating while you're accelerating, but acceleration, which does not mean go fast. It's a Latin word, acceleratio. It means to increase in speed. So if you're going to move your hand for a given cast, maybe 12 inches, if you're 6 inches through that cast, you're not 50% of the way through. You're maybe 10%. It gets faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So much so that in 5/10 of a second, you can make the entire stroke. But you must start out slow and get faster, 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 and an instantaneous stop. What the acceleration does, acceleration is everything. It puts the bend in the rod, and you can get a bend clear into the corks on that rod in 1/2 of a second, right? And the instantaneous stop, and I don't mean necessarily your hand has to freeze. It can still move a little, but you stop applying any force to the handle. You relax everything and just let the rod straighten. The rod can do that. It can't bend by itself. So my job is to simply get it bent and just wait for it. It's like shooting a gun. You squeeze the trigger. You don't push the bullet. You just do your job. If you accelerate your hand faster, faster, and stop. It only has to move 12 inches, a foot, 2 feet. Doesn't matter. It depends on the cast. But you do that. In fact, you can make the same speed. You can make a 12-inch move or a 3-foot move, 36 in the same time because of the additional leverage, because of the hand moving that third-class lever again. It moves farther, faster, without more force. If you want to stay at 12 inches or a predetermined stroke, like you move from A to B, a time or something like that, perfect for this cast. Now you want to go 3 times as far. You want to cast 3 times as hard? Or do you want to use the same motion? Well, you increase the leverage. This is what the physicist verified for me. And he said, that's why you're using so little effort, because you're employing basic principles of the mechanics here that make this whole thing work. So but that acceleration is where I always start with almost everybody. I have these guys on video, all these people I teach, and you'll see them make this incredibly fast backcast. And then I take it and I slow it down and I show it to people. And he's got this much bend in the rod, just as fast as hard as he went with all his strength. The loop is about 15 or 20 feet high. You could drive a semi-truck through there. And we slow it down. And then his forward cast, boom. And again, he's got a 15-foot high loop and just turns over and flops there. If he would just take it, and I'll have to slow it down, way down, like this, fast, fast, fast. That last part, and I've got videos of these things side by side, you can see the difference. Acceleration is what loads the rod. Acceleration is what loads the rod. Of course, you might do it a different direction. You might want it to go there, up, down, and so forth. But what loads the rod more than anything else, the first thing you've got to train your hand and practice it, is getting that acceleration to a stop. A stop of any kind of, you put a force against the handle, you go faster, 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 but it only takes that long. And that's remarkable. People they think it's got to be a big grandiose motion. No, it's this and this. It's not this, it's this. Start out, it looks the same to most people, but I'm starting out slowly and I'm going fast and stop. Here, I call it the windshield wiper. Look at the windshield wiper in your car. It starts here, and it instantly goes to a and stays the same speed across back and forth. The metronome from the river runs through it, where it goes click, click, click. It's doing nothing.
There's no acceleration.
There's
there.
no acceleration.
It's
a same speed. And so people think, well, if I turn the windshield wiper on high speed, that'll make it go. No, I don't care how fast it's going. It can be. I have a picture of one guy. I didn't see the rod move when he did it. 1/10 of a second. The line went about 8 feet. But he made the stroke, fastest stroke I've ever seen. Boom.
But it was fast at the beginning and fast at the end. I think that's the important thing to learn from the acceleration article. And I think the charts and the video are super helpful.
Yeah.
You can see
that,
how
that
it ramps up right at the end.
Absolutely. It ramps up fast. In the last 10th or 20th of a second, the speed in your hand doubles. A lot of people call that power stroke. And that's okay. I mean, good casters, I'm talking about some great casters, they say, well, you have a power stroke. It's not a separate move. It's just there's only one motion. You throw a ball, you made one motion. You throw a punch, it's one motion. You hit the golf ball, it's one motion. Pro golfer takes 1/4 of a second to hit that ball on a downstroke. 1/4 of a second. But he's accelerating the whole time until collision, until impact.
But there's a lot happening in less than a second. So it's very,
it takes time.
That's a very precise thing that you need to train into your brain to get that acceleration at the end.
And you do that, and you do that, and do that until it becomes second nature. And your muscles should be as relaxed as possible to the very minimum. It's not a matter of strength and muscles. It's a matter of just simply starting slow and ending fast. That's
what I appreciate about your casting. There's a lot of people I watch fishing, and they're getting it out there and they're catching fish, but they're putting way more effort into it than they need to. Like, they're getting the job done.
Yeah.
When I watch you cast, it's effortless, and that's what I love and appreciate about it, because you're making it easy. You're making it look easy. Anyways,
that's the first thing I got. That's the first thing I noticed about Lefty. It was so effortless. The bottom line is, what is the least amount of effort I can get away with? Not how much you can put into the cast, how little. At a show one time, there was a young fellow there, he was a tournament caster, and he was demonstrating at a casting pond. He come back and threw a really long line. He's young, he's athletic. He made this cast. Fellow standing next to me said, "Wow, did you see how far that thing went?" And I said, "Gee, I didn't." I said, "I got distracted." I said, I didn't notice." I said, "I was paying attention to how hard he had to cast." I said, "With what he just put into that cast, I'm surprised that line's not still going." I said, "He casted way harder than he had to. He could throw a long line. I'm not questioning that. But he's got a lot of room for improvement. He should have been able to do that with half or a third of that effort that he put into it. He was not a great caster. He was a good caster. I'm not taking anything away from him, but he's got room for improvement."
And we all do. Like,
we should. So do
make it easier. Make fewer false casts. Get it there easier with less effort. Yeah. Get it there more precisely.
Yeah.
With more control. So, and I think most of it is just about thought. Like, I am guilty when I'm fishing a lot. There's the fish, and the fly goes there and stuff. I'm just not thinking about it too much. But you analyze everything, and I think if you really think about it and then practice those things, you can really, really improve things.
Even if I make what I consider a perfect cast for this situation, I put it there. The first thing that comes into my mind, Ross, honest to God, I say to myself, "Hey, that was perfect." I said, could I have done it with less effort? I question it. I'm never at the end. I keep searching. Was it possible to even use it even less? That was a good cast. It was a perfect cast for this situation, I would call it. But could I have done it even with less? That's what I'm always searching for. Maybe I could have done this a little bit. And
you must have been a tough professor when you're grading the papers.
No, I don't know that I was. I gave them every benefit of it. I really did, because I've been there. I know what they're going through. And I always lean toward, I'll give them a little extra thing, because I can't interpret what was going through their mind. And maybe I didn't cover something properly. First thing you've got to question as a teacher, number one, I had one teacher, a colleague of mine, who believed that every student who got an A was the result of this person's teaching ability. And every student who got a D or an F or a C minus or something, it was because they were a bad teacher. And she said as much. And I thought, there's two people involved in here. The first thing I have to do is question me. Did I explain this right? No, I'll try to explain it a different way. Tell me if you don't understand. I'll use another. It might be a silly analogy or an image or something, but if it helps you to get the idea. When I studied voice, and I studied classical voice for 25 years. I was a concert baritone. And my teacher used to say, try this. And she'd be at the piano, and I'd try, no, that's not worth it. Imagine this, picture. And she'd give me crazy mental images. And finally, she would, and I'd just think of this. Picture you're out on a boat, and there's a wave coming in, and I'd hit this. There it is, she says. Whatever you were thinking there, do it again, she says, because...
That worked.
That worked, exactly. I found something. And it's the same thing with the casting. I can't translate into this person what I'm feeling. It's impossible. I try the best I can in words and in images and drawings and photographs and video to explain it to them. And they have to keep trying it just same as I did until they find it. And it's so neat when a person tries. Sometimes a person grabs it just like that. And I said, wow, that was incredible. I said, good. I said, now let's do it again in this situation. What would you do here? And the guy said, well, I'd start back here. I said, yeah, okay. He's starting to get into a pattern of thinking and analyzing. That's what I'm looking for.
It reminds me of a T-shirt my son has. It says, I can explain it to you, but I can't make you understand it.
Exactly. So I try to explain in different ways, and I come in a different way. I said, okay, now forget that. Think of this. Imagine this. It may be silly, I don't know, but if it cracks the nut, as I call it, for that person, and he's, oh, I see, good, that was it. You see, and so now, okay, I predicted one fellow one time I was giving a lesson. I told him before he even made the cast he was going to get a tailing loop. He didn't even start the cast. I said he was going to get, because what I did, I said, make a cast for me. He cast, let's just call it 30 feet. I said, okay, good. It was good. I said, make another 10 feet. He cast, say, 40 feet. I'm just picking numbers. I said, okay. He went 50 feet. I said, okay, try 10 more. He made the last cast. And I said, stop right there. Because if you try another 10 feet, you're going to get a tailing loop. And I knew there was at least a 75% chance that's what's going to happen. He lowered the rod, just put the rod down. He turned and looked at me. He says, yeah, that happens all the time. I said, I know it does. I just told you that. And I said, and we fixed it out because I saw in that loop going out, he had nice smooth, we call a loop, the unrolling line was smooth. When he got to that longest one, the 60-foot cast, right, the shape of the loop made a very gradual, a very slight change in shape. The top of the loop got like I call a leading edge. It was no longer symmetrical like the front of a torpedo or rounded like that. It was getting a little too, because what he did, when he made the cast just before that, he brought it back to a certain, he made the first cast, he stopped back here. Second, he went here. He kept lengthening his stroke, which is what he should have been doing, and he's making beautiful casts. The last two casts, he came back and stopped at the exact same point to make, let's call it the 50-foot cast. For the 60-foot cast, he started from the same place again. He had to cast harder now. He shouldn't have had, he stopped.
He was making longer casts, but he wasn't lengthening his stroke.
He stopped lengthening. He was lengthening for each one, but then he stopped lengthening it because he determined he's not going to go back any farther. So now he's got to go farther. So what has he got to do? He's going to affect his casting stroke. If he had taken it back that much farther, right, he would have made it effortlessly. But he stopped at the same point. I saw the change in the loop, and I said, now if he tries to go for, let's say, a 70-foot cast, he's going to have to cast even harder. And all he's going to end up doing is pushing this rod forward, and I can show you what's going to happen to the tip and the shape of the line, and I can tell you he's going to get a tailing loop and exactly why and how. Because that's what I mean.
Once again, going back to the beginning, you're changing the parameters. You have to change the way you cast.
Absolutely.
You can't just cast the same way and
That's
add
right.
more effort.
And expect more things. Just go harder and harder and harder. No. You change the direction. You change the angles. You change the leverage. For one cast to a cast, same as in golf, same as in tennis, same as in kicking a soccer ball. I don't care. Martial arts, it's the same thing. Same in boxing. You might just do this. You throw a dart at a dartboard. You just do this. You throw a javelin 200 feet. You got to start from back here, and it all changes.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you for coming in today and having a chat about Lefty and your books and casting in general. I really appreciate it.
I just hope it helps, Ross. I really do. I'm trying to get people to have more fun with the sport. I was criticized one time. I wrote an article for Fly Fisherman, and somebody wrote into the editor and said, well, it was an interesting article and so forth, but Jaworowski talks about fly casting being fun. And, he said, if all I want is fun, I'll sit home and watch this so-and-so comedy show on television. And I thought to myself, no. And John Randolph, we laughed about it. I thought, this guy is a type A. I said, he probably makes 7 figures a year. He comes into the same passion he does when he's his stock market investments, and he's going to dominate this thing. I said, guess what? If I'm not having fun, I wouldn't be doing it. I'm a kid at heart. I'm just a grown-up kid with grown-up toys called fly rods. That's all. And I want to share that. That was Lefty's whole thing. I want to share with people. I want them to have some of the experiences. I can't translate or put my experiences. They've got to create their own. But I can help you in certain things that way. So anyway,
well,
thanks
let's have
for the
more fun with
opportunity.
it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks a bunch.
Right.